My name is Hilda. I'm 60 years old. What I'm about to share will change the way you look at your own family. Just 3 days ago, my son, Damian, and my daughter-in-law, Melissa, shoved my husband Henry and me off a 90-foot cliff. As I lay crushed and bleeding, I heard Henry whisper with what breath he had left, "Hilda, don't move." Play dead, I thought that was the worst moment, until Henry told me a truth no mother should ever have to hear. It was a secret our children kept for 25 years. For 4 decades, Henry and I believed we had built a good, steady life. Each morning, in our small suburban home, I brewed coffee while birds sang outside the kitchen window. I taught at the local elementary school and came home with stories about my students. Henry ran a carpentry shop and made beautiful furniture. His hands were rough from work, but his touch was gentle and precise. We had 2 sons, Richard, our firstborn, and Damian, who was 5 years younger. Richard was sunshine in the house, laughing, helpful, eager to stand beside his father in the shop, quick to shield me from worry. Damian was quieter, more guarded, but I loved him with the same strength. I believed I never played favorites. At least, that's what I told myself. Sundays after church, we gathered at the oak table Henry carved himself. Richard talked about studying engineering. Damian said little, pushing food around his plate. Life seemed simple and good. In the evenings, Henry and I walked the trail around our town, daydreaming about grandkids, retirement, and growing old together in our home. I never imagined those walks were practice for the one that nearly ended our lives. On weekends, my sisters, Harriet and Irene, came with their families. Kids ran around, the kitchen filled with shared recipes, and the men fixed a loose hinge or a leaky hose. Henry still brought me wildflowers, even after 40 years of marriage. He helped me grade spelling tests. I held boards steady in his shop while he cut. We were a team, solid, or so I believed. At night, we sat on the porch, counted stars, and talked about seeing the ocean for the first time and building a smaller house when our boys had families of their own. I thought we were living the perfect story. I didn't understand yet how a perfect surface can hide the deepest cracks. When Richard turned 20, something shifted. He and Damian started arguing behind closed doors. I'd catch a few tense words, then silence when I walked in. Henry called it normal brother stuff. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe that nothing could be truly wrong. Then, one October night, exactly 25 years ago, Richard didn't come home for dinner. We waited until 11, then 12, then 1 o'clock in the morning. Damian sat in his room studying, but there was a look in his eyes whenever I asked about his brother that I couldn't place. Henry went out with the neighbors to search. They combed every path, bridge, and bend in town. At dawn, they found Richard's body at the bottom of the river gorge. The police said it was an accident in the dark. I accepted it. I couldn't see past the official story to the horror behind it. Richard's funeral was the blackest day of my life. I wore the same black dress I had worn to my mother's funeral. Damian was strangely calm for a younger brother who had just lost the oldest. I cried until there was nothing left. He stayed quiet, with an expression that chills me now that I know what it meant. Henry propped me up when I collapsed and poured out comfort that I now realize must have burned in his mouth. After Richard died, Damian changed completely. He became attentive, helpful, even tender, as if making up for something. He joined Henry in the shop, helped me around the house, and showed up whenever I seemed low. I thought it was grief working its way through him. I didn't see the mask he was building. Years passed. We never fully healed, but we learned to live around the wound. Damian married Melissa, a polite girl from a nearby town. They had 2 beautiful children, and it felt like life was giving us another chance. Melissa called me Mom, helped around the house, and smiled easily. Damian inherited Henry's knack for wood and opened his own business. Everything looked right on the outside. Now I know it was a careful arrangement of lies. About 6 months ago, Henry and I decided to update our will. We had saved for years. With our home, the land I inherited, and our bank balance, we had close to $200,000 for our children and grandchildren. Damian urged us to visit the lawyer. Mom, Dad, you're both 60 now. You need everything in order, he said with a smile that looks different to me now. Melissa nodded, stroking my hand. The same hand she would later help push toward the edge. We love you and want to make sure you're protected. Albert, our longtime lawyer, explained options: a trust, dividing assets among Damian's children, or a traditional will. Damian pressed to list him and Melissa as sole heirs. He promised they would distribute equitably to the grandchildren and said, "You'll need us as you get older. We should have access so we can care for you properly." Something in his tone bothered me, but Henry, always trusting, agreed. I hesitated, remembering how Richard used to talk about supporting us when we were older. But Richard was gone. Damian was our surviving child. We signed on a Tuesday afternoon. Melissa wore a green dress and hugged me. Now we're officially a united family forever, she whispered. A chill ran through me even then. That night, while I made dinner, a heavy feeling settled in my chest. I couldn't shake it. In the weeks that followed, Damian and Melissa visited more often, but their visits felt different. They came with suggestions about the house, potential investments, and life insurance policies. Mom, you should sell this big house and downsize, Melissa said, eyes scanning our furniture like a ledger. We'll help you find a nice apartment in town. But I loved our home. Every corner held a memory. The kitchen where I made countless meals. The workshop where Henry created beauty. The yard where our boys and later our grandchildren played. I told them I couldn't imagine leaving. I saw something hard flash in Damian's eyes. Mom, you're being irrational, he said, sharper than I'd ever heard. This house is too big for 2 people your age. If you fall down the stairs, we might not get here in time. Melissa backed him. Upkeep was expensive, the market was up, and a move would be age-appropriate. Henry began to see the logic. He's practical by nature. But I couldn't shake the deeper wrongness. One night, after another strained talk, I asked Henry if it wasn't strange that Damian was suddenly so focused on our money. Hilda, he cares about us, Henry said as he brushed his teeth. Maybe we should think about it. We aren't young anymore. Still, I saw a shadow in his eyes. Doubt he didn't want to name. Then Damian suggested power of attorney. Just as a safeguard, he said, while Melissa brewed tea like she owned the kitchen. If one of you gets sick, we can manage things without red tape. He sounded so reasonable that for a moment I almost agreed. But his insistence unsettled me. I called my sister Harriet. She's sharp and cautious. After I explained, she was quiet a long time. Hilda, she said, doesn't it strike you as odd that Damian wants so much control? He runs a business. He's not supposed to need your money. Her question hit me hard. Damian never asked for loans. He never claimed to be struggling. Why did he want this power? That afternoon, when Damian showed up for another future talk, I asked in the living room, "Why is control of our finances so important to you? Your father and I are of sound mind." His face hardened, and for an instant I saw something cold and calculating. "It's not about control," he said tightly. "It's about love, care, and family responsibility." The way he said family responsibility felt less like care and more like a warning. Melissa chimed in, soft but firm. "We only want what's best for you. It hurts to see you worry about things we can handle." That night, Henry and I had our first serious argument in years. He thought I was seeing ghosts. I insisted something was off. "Henry," I said over the sink, "do you remember Damian before Richard died?" He was different, distant, and there was something about him that scared me. Henry stopped, dish in hand, and looked at me. I recognized something change in his eyes. "Hilda," he said quietly, "there are things about Richard's death I never told you." My heart pounded. "What things?" He sank into a chair at the same table where Richard did math homework, and Damian sat silent. He rubbed his face like he could wipe away 25 years of guilt. "The night Richard died," he said in a broken voice, "Damian wasn't in his room studying. I saw him leave at about 8 o'clock. I followed. He'd been strange that week, aggressive, resentful. He stared at his hands like the truth was written there. I saw them at the gorge. They were arguing, shouting. What were they fighting about?" I whispered, afraid to hear it. Tears filled Henry's eyes, tears he didn't shed even at Richard's funeral. "About the inheritance," he said. "Damian was furious because Richard, as the oldest, would inherit most of our assets, and there was more. Money, Richard had discovered." "What money?" 3 days before he died, Richard came to me in the shop. He'd found out Damian had been taking money from the family savings. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones. He had proof. He'd investigated for months. My mind staggered. My younger son, the helpful one after Richard's death, had been stealing before his brother died. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because when I reached the gorge," Henry said hoarsely, "it was too late. I saw Damian standing over Richard's body. Damian was shaking and crying, saying, 'It was an accident.' He begged me to help." "Dad," he said, "Richard slipped while trying to hit me." I defended myself. He fell. "But you believed him," I whispered. Henry nodded, weighted with decades of guilt. "He was my son." Richard was already gone. How could I lose the other? I told myself it was an accident. I told myself Damian would change. And the stolen money? He promised to put it back bit by bit. He said he'd invested in a business that failed. He swore never again. I believed him, Hilda. God help me, I believed him. I staggered away from the table. Everything I believed about my family collapsed. Did he pay it back? I asked, though Henry's face already answered me. Never, he said. He kept taking small amounts. And I pretended not to see. If I confronted him, I had to admit I'd covered up a killing. I became his accomplice. I felt the truth lock into place. That's why he wants control now, I said. Not to care for us, but to finish what he started. Henry nodded. And there's more, he added. I've been quietly looking into his finances. His carpentry shop isn't what he claims. He's near bankruptcy. He owes over $100,000. I read the papers with shaking hands. Damian wasn't successful. He was desperate. Does Melissa know? I asked. I'm sure, Henry said. Watch how she steers the talk, asking about our savings, the house value, the life insurance policies. Those aren't innocent questions, Hilda. She's calculating what our deaths are worth. My blood ran cold. Our death, I whispered. Until then, I had imagined theft and manipulation. But if he killed his brother for money, why would he spare his parents? Henry, I said, clutching his hands. We have to go to the police. With what proof? He asked. I covered up a murder. If I confess now, I go to jail. And who will believe a 65-year-old man who sat on the truth for 25 years? He wasn't wrong. Do we just wait to die? We'll be careful, he said, with a courage I knew was mostly fear. We'll find a way to protect ourselves, to gather evidence. The phone rang. Damian. Hi, Mom, he said, voice honey-sweet. Melissa and I want to celebrate your 40th anniversary with something special. What about those mountains you love? Next weekend, we'll hike, take photos, make a perfect day. I looked at Henry. His face mirrored my terror. That's very kind, I managed. Let us think about it and call you tomorrow. We hung up. We knew he had just invited us to our execution. The mountains, I said. He'll push us. Claim it was a hiking accident. Henry nodded, like at the gorge all those years ago. We didn't sleep. We held each other and planned how to live through our son's plan. Over the next days, we had to act normal. We smiled when they talked about the trip. We nodded at their excitement. Inside, fear screamed. I looked into the faces of the people who killed my firstborn and were preparing to kill me and my husband. On Wednesday, Melissa swept in with a shopping bag and that bright smile that now looked like a mask. Hilda, dear, she said, hugging me with arms that would soon shove me toward death. I bought supplies, cookies, water, fruit, perfect picnic things. She displayed the bag like a child. I also brought my new camera, she said, lifting an expensive digital model. I want to capture every moment. Photos we'll treasure forever. I felt sick. The photos she wanted were of bodies at the bottom of a gorge. Damian appeared with a fresh hiking backpack. Dad, he told Henry. I bought safety gear, ropes, harnesses, lanterns, a first aid kit. The word safety sounded like a joke. Isn't this dangerous for our age? I asked, fishing for an exit. That's why we picked an easy trail, Melissa cooed. Even kids can do it, and we'll be right there to take care of you. That night, when they finally left, we sat shaking in the living room. We can't go, I said, squeezing Henry's hand. We'll make an excuse. If we refuse, he said, they'll try again, maybe a house fire or a staged robbery. In the mountains, we know what they're planning. I hated that he was right. What do we do? We go, he said, but we prepare. I'll hide my phone and record everything. If we live, we'll have proof. If we don't, at least the truth won't die. On Friday, we could barely eat. Henry reviewed his will again, making sure Damian couldn't simply sweep everything. He pulled out a sealed envelope. I wrote a letter to Harriet, he said. It explains Richard's death and what we think Damian is planning. I hid it with our important papers. If we don't come back, she'll know where to start. We went to bed whispering the words you say when you think they might be your last. If something happens, Henry said, know that 40 years with you were the best of my life. Despite everything, I love you. I memorized his breathing. Saturday dawned clear, like the sky wanted to mock us. Damian arrived early, cheerful. Morning, lovebirds, he called. Ready for your adventure? Melissa glowed like a bride, except she was married to death. Over a breakfast we couldn't eat, Damian pointed at a map. This trail leads to a lookout over the whole valley. They say the views are spectacular. His eyes glittered. Melissa added, there are a few steep parts, but nothing you can't handle. We loaded the car. I saw Damian check the backpack, ropes, a small shovel, and what looked like a flare gun. What's that for? I asked. For safety, he said smoothly. If something goes wrong, we can signal. Of course, they'd signal after the accident, so our bodies could be found and the story recorded as a tragedy. The drive took 2 hours and felt endless. Melissa sang along to upbeat songs. Damian drove carefully, stopping fully at every sign. Nothing would ruin the plan. Henry squeezed my hand, and without anyone noticing, started the recording app on his phone. From then on, everything was on tape. At the trailhead, my heart hammered. The place was beautiful, tall trees, the sound of a river. For me, it was a place of execution. We started on an easy path. Melissa kept the camera out, pointing at wildflowers and birds, playing the part of a loving daughter-in-law. Damian stayed behind us, always watching our backs like a hunter. How are you doing, Mom and Dad? He'd ask with false concern. Want to rest? After an hour, the trail steepened. My legs felt like lead. Henry struggled for breath. They knew we weren't used to this. It was designed to tire us. We're almost at the lookout, Melissa said. But I'd seen the map. We had at least another hour if we were going to the real lookout. She was lying. Their chosen spot was sooner. I began to lock every detail into memory. Turns, rocks, tree shapes, so if I survived, I could tell the police exactly where it happened. Henry did the same. Our eyes met now and then, full of fear and resolve. We were walking toward death and evidence at the same time. Oh, look at that! Melissa pointed to a rock formation. That cliff has an incredible view. Let's climb up and take special photos. There it was, the stage. The cliff was about 90 feet above the main trail, reachable by a looser side path. Rocks were slick. There were few trees to grab. The drop was jagged and final. I don't know, I said. That looks risky for people our age. Damian was already heading there. Come on, Mom. Just a few minutes. The photos will be spectacular. The word spectacular made my stomach turn. Henry squeezed my hand again, reminding me the phone was recording. We had to continue. If we refused, they'd only choose a different day. The climb was punishing. Twice, I nearly slipped. At the top, the view truly was stunning. Valley, mountains, river cutting through the trees. On any other day, it would have been a joy. Today, it was a set. Over here for photos, Melissa called from near the edge. I want the valley in the background. We moved toward her. I saw Damian position himself behind us, measuring angles and distance. Perfect, Melissa said, lifting the camera. Hug and smile. We held each other while the camera clicked. Each shot felt like a countdown. Take one more, Damian said, stepping closer. But this time, stand back a little so the landscape looks better. One step back would put us right at the edge. Henry and I shared a look. This was it. We stepped back. I felt the ground thin behind my heels. Smile, Melissa said, her voice stripped of sweetness. This will be your last photo. Damian lunged. The plan was simple. Shove us backward, take a few accident photos, then go down to discover the bodies. But Henry had braced for this second. He grabbed Damian's wrist and yanked him forward. If we die, you're coming with us, he shouted with a rage I'd never heard. For a breathless moment, the four of us teetered on the lip, locked in a macabre struggle. Melissa shrieked and threw herself toward Damian, but our combined weight tipped the balance. The ground shifted. Gravity won. We went over, together, air screaming past as the rocks rushed up. I thought of Richard and how he must have felt at the gorge 25 years ago. The landing was savage. Bones cracked. My body felt like it shattered. Blood filled my mouth. Pain flooded everything. I thought Damian had won again. There would be no witnesses. Then Henry's voice, weak but steady. Hilda, don't move. Play dead. I was still alive. The pain was blinding. My clothes were soaked and sticky, but I held still. I slowed my breathing. A few feet away, I heard Damian and Melissa moaning. They were alive, but worse off than us by the sound of it. Melissa, Damian croaked, are you okay? I think my leg's broken, she gasped. It hurts so much, Damian. What about the old people? Old people. We had never been family to her. We were obstacles. Damian dragged himself closer. My heart hammered. I was sure he could hear it. They're dead, he said after a long minute. Eyes open, but no breathing. He lied, but the lie was our chance. Perfect, Melissa whispered, satisfaction in her voice. It worked like we planned. Well, except we failed too. She gave a bitter laugh. At least we won't have to pretend anymore. They discussed what to do next. Both hurt, but mobile. They would crawl until they could call for rescue, then tell the story of how we tragically fell while taking photos and they barely survived. Remember the story, Damian said. We were taking pictures when a rock came loose under Dad's feet. He tripped and pulled Mom. We tried to help, but we fell too. Make sure our stories match. I know, Melissa said. We've practiced this 100 times. We're the traumatized survivors. Poor us. We lost our dear in-laws in a horrible accident. If I hadn't lived through it, I might have believed her. Their voices faded as they crawled away. When the silence settled, Henry whispered so softly I barely heard. Hilda, are you okay? I whispered back. He said his left leg was broken and his ribs felt cracked. I scanned my own body, white-hot pain in my right arm, pounding head, a shoulder that didn't feel right, but I was alive. We're bad, I said, but alive. He checked his phone with one shaky hand. It works, but there's no signal. That was terrifying. Injured in a gorge, no signal. If no one came, we would die here. Henry, I whispered, before it's too late, tell me everything about the night Richard died. He took a long breath, like he'd been waiting 25 years to exhale. He told me about Richard confronting him with bank statements, about Damian's theft, about following Richard to the gorge, about the shouting. He told me it wasn't an accident. He saw Damian shove Richard hard. He saw Richard flail for balance and fall. He told me he chose silence because he couldn't bear losing his only surviving son. He told me Damian never paid a penny back and kept taking, while Henry kept quiet and became an accomplice with every month that passed. Then, voices echoed faintly. Damian and Melissa had found help. Soon, rescuers would arrive, and our would-be killers would deliver their most convincing performance. Henry and I had to decide. Reveal ourselves now and risk them destroying evidence, or keep acting until we were safe. Hilda, he whispered, urgent. The phone recorded everything up there. Melissa said it was a plan. Damian called us obstacles. We have enough, but if they realize we're alive and aware, they'll try again. We need the right moment. He was right. If they suspected we had proof, they wouldn't leave us breathing. They're down here, Damian called from above, voice cracking perfectly. My parents, please hurry. A firm voice answered, likely the rescue leader. Gear clinked, ropes hissed. Melissa sobbed on cue. We were taking pictures so happily. A rock gave way. It happened so fast. Boots reached us. A rescuer checked my neck for a pulse and leaned close to feel my breath. This one still has a faint pulse, he said of Henry. The woman? Not sure. Get the medical team down here. It was working. They believed we were barely alive. Me, even less so. We would reach a hospital and then we could speak. Paramedics stabilized us. Oxygen, splints, straps. Every instinct screamed to open my eyes and beg for help. but I stayed in the act. The man is stable, but critical, someone reported. The woman is in very serious condition. Pulse almost imperceptible. Transport now. Perfect. We'd be separated from Damian and Melissa under hospital control. During the hoist, I heard people praising Damian and Melissa for bravery. They had no idea the real miracle was that Henry and I were still alive to tell the truth. In the helicopter, I sensed Henry on the adjacent stretcher. The medics worked hard to keep him stable. I feared he might die before we could speak. "Ma'am," a paramedic said to me softly, "if you can hear me, hold on." Few more minutes. At the hospital, controlled chaos took over. Doctors and nurses shouted orders. I was wheeled into a treatment room. I kept the act, but I needed a way to alert someone I could trust. "Doctor," a nurse said, "her vitals are unusual, stronger than expected." For a heartbeat, I panicked. Had I blown it? "It happens in extreme trauma," the doctor said. "The body fights. Keep close watch." Moments later, I heard familiar voices in the hall. Damian and Melissa asking to see us just in case. The doctor allowed brief visits. This was the most dangerous moment. I had to convince them I was dying. Damian took my hand. I forced myself not to pull away. "Mom," he whispered, "if you can hear me, I love you. I'm so sorry. Poisoned honey." Melissa leaned in. "Hilda, dear, you've been like a mother to me. We'll never forget you." Then Damian bent to my ear and murmured, "I hope you learned your lesson, Mom. You shouldn't have asked so many questions about our finances. Some truths are better left buried, just like Richard." His words froze my blood, and they weren't private. A nurse in the room, her badge read INS, had heard him. Her eyes widened. Melissa hissed, "What did you say about Richard?" Damian stiffened. "Nothing. Mom always wondered about that night. It doesn't matter now. It did matter. And Melissa knew he'd slipped." "Damian," she whispered tensely, "let's go. Give the doctor space." After they left, Nurse Inns approached my bed and whispered, "Ma'am, I know you can hear me. What I heard wasn't normal. If you're in danger, show me." I moved my index finger, barely. Her breath caught. "Oh my God! She's pretending!" She leaned closer. "I'll check your monitors. If those people did this, move your finger 3 times." I moved it 3 times without hesitation. "I'm telling the attending," she said. "Keep pretending until we can protect you. Do you understand?" I moved my finger once. Minutes later, she returned with an older doctor and 2 police officers. "Ma'am," the doctor said quietly, "Nurse Inns told us. You're safe now. The officers are here." "Can you open your eyes?" one officer asked. Slowly, I did. The lights hurt at first, but I focused on their faces. "Thank God," Inns whispered. I thought I was losing it. Ma'am, the officer said, I'm Detective Johnson. We believe you're in danger. What happened on that mountain? My voice rasped. My son and his wife pushed us. Over the next hours, I gave a full statement. Richard's death, Damian's thefts, the pressure to change our will, and the plan to kill us. The most important piece was Henry's recording. Your husband recorded evidence? The detective asked. Yes, I said. The plans, the confessions, everything. They went to Henry's room. He had woken up by then. He handed over the phone. Here's everything, he said. 2 years of lies and the truth about today. While Tex analyzed the file, Damian and Melissa stayed in the waiting room, playing the part of grieving family. They had no idea their show was over. The recording is clear, the detective returned to say. Explicit admissions about Richard's murder, theft, and premeditated attempted murder today. It's enough to arrest them. Here? I asked, thinking of our safety. We have officers in place, he said. As soon as the warrant is signed, they're in cuffs. You're under protection until then. I pictured them downstairs accepting sympathy, planning our funerals and their payday. They didn't know we were upstairs, unraveling it all. There's more, the detective added, holding a folder. We looked into your son's finances. Not only is he bankrupt, he owes money to dangerous lenders, unofficial ones. So we weren't just inconvenient, I said. We were his only way out. Exactly, he said. Without your inheritance, he would likely be dead in weeks. I thought of our grandchildren. What about the kids? Social services will take temporary custody, he said gently. Once you recover, you can apply for custody. The idea of raising the children of our would-be killers stunned me. But they're innocent. They deserve a home where love is real. It's time, the detective said when an officer handed him papers. Warrants are signed. From my window, I saw officers move into position in the parking lot. Damian Black and Melissa Black, a commanding voice rang out. You are under arrest for the murder of Richard Black and the attempted murder of Hilda and Henry Black. Silence. Then Melissa's shrill protest. What are you talking about? We're the victims. Our in-laws died in an accident? Your in-laws are alive, an officer said. They've provided evidence of your crimes. A raw shout burst from Damian. That's impossible. We saw them die. They were dead. Another confession, caught on police recorders. In the scramble, I heard Melissa blame Damian. It was his idea. He forced me. Damian snapped back. You picked the cliff. You planned it. Loyalty collapsed in minutes. Each clawed to save themselves. An hour later, Detective Johnson returned. They're in custody, he said, exhausted but relieved. Each is blaming the other. That only helps. He held up a small device. We also found this in Damian's backpack, a digital recorder. He's been recording conversations with you for weeks, probably to check if you suspected anything. My stomach turned. What does that mean for us? It confirms this wasn't impulsive, the detective said. It was planned. In one recording, Melissa says, "We have to act fast before they go to the police." Every new fact showed the same truth. They weren't just greedy, they were methodical. "There's also evidence of forged signatures," he added. "Your son tried to access your bank accounts. If you had died on that mountain, he would have had immediate access." "How much did he steal in total?" I asked, bracing. "About $50,000 over the last 5 years," he said. "Small pulls he thought you wouldn't catch, but they add up." Days in the hospital blurred. Interviews, lawyers, media calls. The local press called it the most horrible family betrayal of the decade. Harriet arrived in tears and hugged me as if I'd been gone for decades. "Hilda," she kept saying, "I always knew something was off after Richard died, but I never imagined this." "What about the children?" I asked. "I saw them yesterday," she said sadly. "They're confused, asking why their parents can't come home." "They're too young to understand." Albert, our lawyer, the same one who handled our will, came with updates. "The case is strong," he said. "Recordings, arrest scene statements, financial evidence, hard to fight." Then he added, "Their lawyers may push a plea to a lesser charge by painting it as a crime of passion, not premeditated." "A crime of passion?" I said, furious. "They planned for weeks, bought gear, picked the spot." "We'll fight that," he said. "Your testimony will matter." "It will be emotionally brutal, but the jury needs to see the truth." I knew I had to do it. For Richard, for Henry, and for 2 grandchildren who deserve to grow up wrapped in real love, not manipulation. 3 weeks after the arrests, Henry and I went home. We moved slowly, he with crutches, my arm in a sling. The house felt like a stage after closing night. Dishes in the sink, the bed unmade. Flowers Damian brought that week still on the table, now wilted. It was as if time stopped on the day our old life ended. "Will we ever be happy again?" I asked that first night. Henry pulled me close. "I don't know, Hilda," he said, "but we're alive. We have the truth, and for the first time in 25 years, there are no more secrets." The trial began 6 months later. When I took the stand, I looked Damian in the eye for the first time since the arrest. I saw no regret, no pain, not my son, a stranger wearing my son's face. When I finished, I turned to him. "Damian," I said, "I don't know who you are, but you are not my son. My son died the night you killed Richard. What lived in his place for 25 years was a monster I didn't want to see." The jury deliberated for 3 days. They found Damian guilty of first-degree murder for Richard's death and first-degree attempted murder for what he did to us. Melissa was convicted as an accomplice. Both received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, 1 year later, Henry and I have begun the process to adopt our grandchildren. They are sweet, innocent children who deserve a home where kindness is real. Every night when I tuck them in, I tell them about their Uncle Richard, the brother they never had the chance to meet. I tell them about his honesty, his patience in the shop with their grandpa, and how he wanted to study engineering. I tell them how much he loved his family and how his truth helped save ours. And when the house is quiet, I sit with Henry on the porch again. We breathe the night air and listen for birds in the morning. We still plan for the future, slowly, carefully. We know now that perfect pictures can hide broken frames, but we also know that truth, once spoken, can hold a family together more securely than any lock, any will, any beautifully carved table. We can't change what happened on that cliff, or 25 years before it, but we can raise these children with open hands and honest hearts. We can look up at the stars and remember that Richard once looked at the same sky. And we can choose every day to live in a home where love is not a mask, and care is not a trap, and family means safety, not fear. Because in the end, that is what survives. Not the money, not the house, not even the furniture Henry built with such skill. What lasts is the truth we finally told, the justice we finally faced, and the promise we made to the two small souls sleeping down the hall, that they will grow up knowing the difference between a caring hand and a pushing one, between a gentle voice and a lying one, between a family that uses you and a family that would cross any valley, climb any trail, and stand at any cliff just to keep you safe. The months following the trial were a blur of healing, paperwork, and long, quiet evenings where Henry and I tried to understand what life meant now. People from church sent flowers, old neighbors stopped by with casseroles, trying to fill the silence with kindness. The newspapers called us the miracle couple. The parents who survived their own son's attempt to kill them. But when the journalists left and the door closed, all that remained was the hollow ache of loss. Our nights were the hardest. Sometimes I would wake up to find Henry sitting on the porch, staring at the trees. "I keep hearing Richard's voice," he said one night. "And sometimes I almost hear Damian's too." His voice cracked. "He wasn't born evil, Hilda." Somewhere along the line, I failed him. I took his hand. "We both did," I said softly. "But we also saved each other." That became our quiet truth. We had survived because we faced the darkness together. During our recovery, social services began arranging visits with our grandchildren. Ella, 8, and Noah, 6. The first time they came to see us after everything, I didn't know how to act. They ran into my arms as if nothing had changed, their little hands wrapping around me, their innocence completely untouched by the crimes of their parents. "Grandma?" Ella asked, her big eyes filled with confusion. "When can we see Mommy and Daddy again?" I froze. Henry stepped in gently. "Sweetheart," he said, kneeling beside her. "Mommy and Daddy did some very bad things. They have to stay somewhere for a long time so other people can be safe. But you're safe here. You'll always be safe here." She looked at him puzzled. "So, we live with you now?" "Yes, baby," I said, hugging her tightly. "You live with us. This is your home." That was the moment something inside me shifted. I realized we weren't just survivors anymore. We were guardians of truth, of love, and of two young souls who deserved better than the lies they had been born into. Chapter 2. Rebuilding from ashes. Rebuilding our lives wasn't easy. The house still carried ghosts. Every time I passed the workshop, I saw Richard sanding a chair, Damian pretending to help, Henry smiling proudly. I could almost smell the sawdust. It took weeks before I could walk in without crying. Henry, despite his injuries, returned to that workshop little by little. He said working with his hands made him feel human again. I would hear the faint hum of his sander, the rhythmic tapping of nails. It was a sound that told me we were still here, still capable of creating something new. Meanwhile, I went back to teaching part-time. The children's laughter reminded me that innocence still existed in the world. When I told them stories, they'd listen with wide eyes, stories about honesty, kindness, and courage. I never mentioned my own story, but sometimes when I looked into their faces, I thought of Damian as a little boy, wondering how life had twisted him into the man he became. Our lawyer, Albert, visited often, guiding us through custody paperwork. "It's unusual," he said one afternoon, "but the court is sympathetic. Given the circumstances, I have no doubt you'll be granted full custody." And we were. The day the judge signed the papers, Henry squeezed my hand. "We have a family again," he whispered. I nodded, tears spilling down my cheeks. It wasn't the family we started with, but it was one worth saving. Chapter 3. The Echoes of Truth. Damian and Melissa's trial might have ended, but the echoes of it lingered. Every few weeks, the prosecutors sent updates, appeals filed, motions denied. They would never walk free, but their shadows still reached us. Once, a journalist sent us a letter asking for an exclusive interview. I tore it up. Our story wasn't for headlines anymore. It was for us, for our grandchildren, for peace. Sometimes, at night, I replayed the last moment before the fall. The way Damian's eyes looked, not wild, but determined. Not insane, but coldly sure. That image haunted me more than the pain of the fall itself. Henry, ever the realist, built something new from it. One afternoon, I walked into the workshop and found him carving a wooden plaque. When he turned it around, I read the words he had etched by hand. "Truth survives the fall." It took my breath away. We hung it above the workshop door. Chapter 4. The Grandchildren's World. Raising Ella and Noah gave our lives purpose again. They brought light into the house, sticky fingerprints on windows, giggles echoing down the hall, toys scattered everywhere. It was chaos, but it was beautiful chaos. At first, I avoided telling them much about their parents, but children are sharper than we think. One night, Noah asked, "Grandpa, why don't Mommy and Daddy call anymore?" Henry looked at me before answering. "Because they made choices that hurt people, Noah. Sometimes when adults make terrible mistakes, they have to go away for a long time." "Will they ever come back?" "Maybe someday," Henry said quietly. "But we'll see what happens." Later, after the kids went to bed, I asked him, "Do you think they should ever see them again?" He sighed. "I don't know. Maybe when they're older. Maybe when they can understand what forgiveness really means." Forgiveness. That word lived on the edge of every prayer I said. Some days, I thought I'd found it. Other days, I couldn't imagine ever forgiving the people who tried to destroy us. Chapter 5. The Unexpected Visit. Almost a year after the verdict, Detective Johnson stopped by. He looked older, more tired. "I wanted to see how you were both doing," he said. Henry poured him coffee. "As well as we can be," he said. "The kids keep us busy." The detective smiled faintly. "That's good. You deserve peace." He hesitated before continuing. "There's one more thing you should know. We recently uncovered an additional recording from Damian's device, one he deleted but our forensics team recovered. It's from 2 days before the mountain trip." He slid a printed transcript across the table. My hands trembled as I read it. Damian's voice was clear. "If this doesn't work, we'll try something else. Maybe the car next time. I don't care how. It just needs to look natural." I closed my eyes. Even after everything, part of me had clung to the idea that maybe he hadn't planned to go through with it. That illusion shattered with those words. Detective Johnson put a hand on Henry's shoulder. "You did everything right. Don't let guilt take root. People like him, they choose their path." When he left, Henry sat in silence for a long time. Then he said softly, "Maybe that's the last piece of truth we needed." Chapter 6. Letters from Prison. Months later, the first letter arrived. It was from Melissa. The handwriting was shaky, the paper smudged with what looked like tears. "Dear Hilda and Henry, I know there's nothing I can say that will ever make this right. I was weak. I let Damian control me. I'm paying for it every day. I think about Ella and Noah constantly. Please tell them I love them even if they never forgive me." I folded the letter carefully and put it away. A week later, another came, this one from Damian. "Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know I see it now. I see what I became. I don't remember the last time I felt human before that day on the mountain. Maybe falling was the only way I could finally face the truth. I didn't respond. Maybe someday I will, but not yet." Chapter 7. The Weight of Legacy. As the seasons changed, our life found a quiet rhythm again. Ella learned to bake cookies with me every Sunday. Noah helped Henry in the workshop, sanding small pieces of wood with the same careful patience his Uncle Richard once had. One day, Henry handed Noah a small carving knife and said, "Your uncle would be proud of you." Noah smiled, not fully understanding the depth of those words, but in that moment, I saw a thread connecting the past to the future. Something pure, surviving all the darkness. Every few weeks, I spoke with Harriet. "You're stronger than you think," she'd tell me. "But don't carry all of it forever, Hilda. Let some of it rest." Maybe that's what healing really means. Not forgetting, but allowing the pain to stop defining every breath. Chapter 8. The Anniversary. 2 years after the fall, we returned to the mountain. The authorities had renamed the trail the Black Family Lookout. The irony wasn't lost on us. There was a small memorial stone there now, not for tragedy, but for truth. It read, "In memory of what was lost, and in honor of what survived." Henry placed a single wildflower, just like the ones he used to bring me. "For Richard," he said quietly. I added another for the part of Damian that might once have been good. And then we stood hand in hand, not as victims anymore, but as witnesses to the full story. Epilogue. What remains? It's been 5 years now. Henry and I are older, slower, but our home is filled with laughter again. Ella is 13. Noah is 11. They ask fewer questions about their parents now, but they still keep the framed photo of Richard on their nightstand. Sometimes, after they've gone to bed, I read them a story I wrote myself. A story about a family who fell but found the strength to rise again. I never tell them it's about us. I want them to hear it as a lesson about courage, not tragedy. When they're asleep, Henry and I sit on the porch with mugs of coffee and watch the stars. The same stars we once counted when we thought life was perfect. Now we know better. Perfection doesn't last, but truth does. And as long as truth lives in this house, carved into the wood of our memories, I know Richard's spirit is here too, watching, forgiving, guiding the family he once tried so hard to hold together.